Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another of the regular, though irregularly held as regards location, meetings of the Libertarian Alliance. Tonight, Mr. David McDonagh will speak about Hume. David Hume.
Yes, the moral philosophy of David Hume. Well, David Hume was born in, thank you. Might as well give you a bit of his life. He was born in 1711. 2 years earlier, his older brother was born, and a year later than his older brother, so a year before David was born, his sister Katrina was born. And when David Hume was 2 and his older brother 4, his father died. His father had been a lawyer. And his mother never married again. She devoted her life to bringing up the family. David was immediately allotted £70 income a year, and which was a fair sum of money in 1711 in the 18th century. And his sister Katrina was allotted £50 a year. And his older brother got the estates 9 miles. They sent the 2 boys off to Edinburgh University, or his mother did, when David was 13, and they spent 3 years there at Edinburgh, but they left without a degree, as was common in those days. David then was told to study for the law because his father had been a lawyer, and he needed some occupation. But he didn't like the law, and as he studied it more, he got to like it less. But instead was corrupted by the works of Virgil and Cicero, and so he did work out his own philosophy, which gave him something of a depression. And he went to the doctors with depression, and basically he never did quite get over it. His philosophical conclusions depressed him somewhat. They shouldn't do so, really, actually. But apart from that, he used to always go back from philosophy to normal life, in which he cheered up again. He liked custom, he liked normal society, and he didn't much like his philosophical conclusions, which were to do. He used the strict term of empiricism, what you can observe. He overlooked, oddly enough and ironically, there's a pinch of criticism, but I'll go back to exposition rather than criticism after this one point. He overlooked the fact that you can never quite observe a fact, because a fact is abstract. But nevertheless, he used this word of what we can observe, the idea of what we can observe, to get rid of all sorts of things. And he couldn't find any causation, couldn't find any morals in the external world, and so on. And so, because you couldn't see them, and so this was the main thing that this caused him a depression. He decided to move. He got into a bit of trouble with a few girls, and one of them who he rather liked, and the other which he didn't like so much. The one who he didn't like accused him of getting him into trouble. Whether this was true or not, I don't know. But the tribunal decided that it wasn't true. But in the meantime, Hume did go to Bristol, where he changed his name from Home, as it was spelled, to how it was pronounced, to Hume. At Bristol, he criticised his employer for bad style. Now, he himself had bad Scotticisms in his style, but nevertheless, that's a touch of irony. Nevertheless, his employer sacked him. And so he went on his £70 a year, which he was getting, to France, where he thought he could live cheaper. And he happened to locate Descartes' college. He got into access to the library at Descartes' college, and he finished off his work there. And he finished it off by the time he was about 24, 25. And he came back to Britain to try and get it published. One publisher published 2 books of it, and gave him £50 for it. Plus, he was given the 12 copies of the book. Now, this book didn't sell very well. It got 1 or 2 good reviews, but it didn't sell very well. There was a lot of criticism of David among the monks and the Jesuits at the college where he wrote the book up. A lot of people didn't like his outlook. So eventually he reworked this into essays, and the essays were quite released in 2 volumes. They were popular, and they sold better. And under that success, a man called Coates, who was a provost at Edinburgh, suggested he get a job at Edinburgh. But the man who had vacated this job wouldn't actually resign. And when he finally did resign, the provost himself had resigned, and by that time David Hutchinson had been offered the job as well. And David Hutchinson had said, you shouldn't give it to Hume because his thoughts go towards atheism. And so he lost the job owing to his atheistic tendencies. So the essays, he started to rework his original book, Treatise of Human Nature, which most people say is his best book, into 2 volumes. One half was concerning epistemology, an inquiry concerning the principles of knowledge, and the other half, which is what I'm going to deal with shortly, was an inquiry concerning principles of morals. And this was the book that David Hume thought was his best book, and this is a book which I'm basically going to talk about. Now, the reason why I think we ought to have a look at this book is because of its eulogy of property. And it's now I think there's a lot in both his first book as a whole, Treatise of Human Nature, and in the 2 later books, which I think are approximately correct, except that they use words and jargon, if you like, that I would reword. I'd present it if I was presenting, what you meant to say, I presented in completely different words. For example, in the first of those 2 rewritten books, in the first half of the treatise, because the 2 books reproduce the whole Treatise of Human Nature. So the first book, an inquiry concerning principles of understanding, Hume often says our beliefs are irrational because we don't choose them. Well, I think that's exactly the opposite of the truth. I think that if we do choose our beliefs, then we would indeed be in control of what we thought, and therefore not open to reason. It is because we don't choose our beliefs, which is why we are open to reason. I don't choose my understanding, I understand automatically, and therefore then I understand what you say, whether I want to understand it or not. It's not a matter of choice, and that makes debate worthwhile. Debate wouldn't be worthwhile if a person could choose what he wanted to believe. I mean, it'd be futile. But anyhow, that's the first book. I'm not going to talk much about that. I'm talking about the second book. And the major reason why I want to talk about the second book is because it's basically a hymn to private property. This is as it comes over. But as Dominic reminded me earlier on today, the whole purpose of it was to push forward the idea. There are 2 streams of thought, as Hume says actually in the book. There's the theme of thought that morals is to do with the sentiments, and there's another theme of thought in morals, a thought which I must confess I think is basically right, the other stream of thought, associated with the Neo-Platonists Cobworth and others, and also with the understudy to not Locke, who claimed to be the understudy to Isaac Newton, but the real understudy to Isaac Newton, who wrote to Leibniz on Newton's behalf. I don't know if I remember his name now. I'm afraid I forget his name. But anyway, this chap did hold, as Cobworth did, that morals was all to do with reason, and morals was sort of like geometry, a bit like geometry, a bit like a priori. Now, Hume is often said to be the first person to see the difference between is and ought, or between facts and values. The this is not quite true. Leibniz had the distinction between facts and values and dit and dort. But also, of course, the Stoics had the difference between is and dort and facts and values. You know, as the Stoics said, it doesn't matter what the facts are, we are free to do what we like, and what the facts are isn't the world as it is isn't necessarily as it ought to be. So they had the fact-value distinction. The Stoics, many different Stoics had it. And I always did used to think before this penny dropped, and that was the case with the Stoics, that being that Hume and Leibniz were great librarians, that there must have been someone in the ancient world who had this fact-value distinction. But anyway, because they had extensive, they were librarians and they were in charge of extensive libraries, and they read a lot of the ancients. And of course, it is the Stoics who stared at me in my face for years, and I didn't see it. But anyway, the Stoics had the fact-value distinction. So there's these two schools of thought, one reason and the other sentiment. And Hume, of course, as Dominic quite rightly said, championing the sentiment of this, and the major thrust of his book, and the major thrust of Adam Smith's later book, published. This book came out in 1751, Theory an inquiry concerning the principles of morals, and Adam Smith came out in 1759, Theory of Moral Sentiments. Both of those was to eulogise sentiments or put the thesis that morals was to do with sentiments or with values. Now the other people thought that morals was to do with abstract reasoning. Now the celebrated phrase here is, of course, as Dominic said earlier on in our discussion, that the paradox is that where Hume says reason is the slave of the passions, and so it ought to be, words to that effect. Now I think this is not quite correct. I think he's making too much of a complete distinction between reason and the passions here. I think reason, and he himself says in many parts, he hints that reason helps sort out the passions, and I think that's true. And in the passages where he does say that reason sorts out the passions, I think he's flouting his earlier distinction that reason is only the slave of the passions. However, his major idea of this book is to push forward the idea of sentiments and basically utility as the basis of morals. And so basically what is good or bad is a matter of utility. Now he hasn't organised this. We were meeting in the Jeremy Bentham pub, by the by. I ought to say to anyone, if this recording ever gets onto YouTube, I would say we're meeting. It was Jeremy Bentham who really organised this utilitarian sort of outlook for the greatest happiness and the greatest number, which he got from Priestley. Now, Bob has often said to me that you can't find this in Priestley, and I've looked through actually. After Bob said it to me, actually, I looked through it. Yeah, this was ages ago. I didn't find it. However, as I said,
it was Hartley, but it still doesn't matter.
No, Hartley says associationism, and of course there is Hume championed a system of associationism in both of these books and in the first early book, which was championed far better according to Priestley and according to Coleridge and the followers of Priestley. But by most people don't understand how Priestley was like a 18th century open university. The person who replaced him in the 19th century was John Stuart Mill. Hell of a lot of people read Priestley. Hell of a lot of people read Mill. In this century, it might be Isaac Asimov in the USA, or perhaps Bertrand Russell in this country. Hell of a lot of people read them. Very popular philosophers, as well as good first-rate philosophers as well. Priestley converted loads of people: Rasmus Darwin, Coleridge, all the Romantic school. Romantic, of course, was the opposite of what Priestley said. They all went against Priestley. They all went in favour of Kant, oddly enough. Coleridge started reading Kant in his 30s and went that way, but and became a Romantic, as Kant, I think, is. Well, it certainly is, certainly. But I think there's a clash, by the by, between the Enlightenment and the Romantic. And basically, not to put too fine a point on it, I think the Enlightenment's right and Romance is wrong. But still, Priestley was certainly of the Enlightenment, and Kant was certainly of Romance. And of course, the later poets later became Romantics, almost to a man, Lord Byron and so on, Shelley and all those people, Keats. what it is, what it hits the reader as, is a hymn to private property, because he has a look at three extremes. One of the extremes, of course, is a widespread, what I might call a school teacher idea. An idea, oddly enough, pushed in the novel and refuted in the same novel almost, called Les Miserables. That's the mispronunciation, isn't it?
That's what it's called in English. Yes, Les Miserables.
Les Miserables, as Bob quite rightly said. I apologise for that bad pronunciation. I can't speak a word of French. Victor Hugo. Now, in the opening of this book, you have someone forced to steal to make a living. The school teacher idea is that this scenario where you are forced to steal for life is a common scenario. The school teachers think it hasn't vanished, in fact, that it's still here in modern society. Hugo, I think, as a socialist, thought that it was a common situation. However, I think it's almost unwitting, because the man gets arrested for this stealing in the novel, pronounced as Bob pronounced it. And he gets imprisoned for this, but after he breaks away from prison and he's on the run, and the novel goes on for about 1,000 pages, perhaps more, where he's being chased. And throughout this time, he's in far more dire straits than he was in the opening of the novel. Yet not once did this saintly man, Zhao Valjean, steal again. So it more or less refutes itself. More or less, he goes through all sorts of hardships and does not steal. So he almost. But anyhow, Hume imagines this situation where there are dire circumstances where you've got to steal, and he grants that you've got to steal. But he says that this extreme is most unrealistic in actual society. We have societies we have now where it's hardly known where you have to steal. But he thinks that in that sort of society, the dire extreme where you would have to steal, law wouldn't make much sense, justice wouldn't make much sense. It would really almost be like Hobbes says, a war of all against all. Society would be almost impossible, and you wouldn't make much progress and so on. But that is alien to reality, according to. Now, the other thing which is alien to reality is the other extreme, which is, if you like, the socialist sort of extreme, where property is so abundant that the law is unnecessary, and the difference between mine and thine is unnecessary. Things are super abundant. We don't have to worry about it. There's plenty of spoons, plenty of knives, plenty of plates, and plenty of fast cars. I won't say plenty of loose women, especially as we've got a mixed company. But there's plenty of everything. Now, Hume has apparently been reading about the Civil War, where the levellers, the diggers, and a lot of other people have these ideas in abundance. These more or less socialist ideas, Marxist type ideas, the ideas of William Morris and people like that. But Hume says these might sound all right, but in actual fact they lead to barbarism. And he says they're utterly unreal. We'll never have that sort of superabundance. What we have is roughly what we have now, where if we cooperate together, we will be able to make a fair amount of plenty, if not ever the superabundance that the socialists imagined or that the diggers imagined. Now, of course, he had a look at these diggers. Of course, Winstanley and people like that, they were quite extreme. They put the death sentence on private property. They could find anyone making a claim to private property, they'd kill them. So that's an extreme. Now, Hume is capable of those. That's obviously, I think most people would think that's a fanatical position. That's degree of intolerance. It's not, when I was reading that wretched Sam Harris on atheism, when he came up with the idea, I'm going to kill these people for their beliefs, I thought, bloody hell. And he thinks the Muslims are extremists. But still, Sam Harris is, in my opinion, an extremist, the reason why I say that is because he wants to kill people for their beliefs, which is ridiculous. I think Winstanley was an extremist, and Hume has got plenty. He studied the Civil War, and he's quite frightened of these people. He thinks they're fanatics, and he thinks their ideas. Now, he has a situation in the book which is almost like Rawls's original position. He says, if we imagine a thought experiment, he doesn't use the word original position, of course, but we imagine a thought experiment and we come out with the ideal society, he says all these things will sound fine. He says, but after he's gone through them, the sort of things, I wonder if Rawls, because Rawls was a utilitarian, wasn't he, before he came up with natural rights, and he must have read Hume. He might have even unconsciously suggested it to him reading through, because it's very much like the original position. However, Hume says, he says, and all this is arrant nonsense. This would ruin society. So instead of Rawls in the original position, we all know what we want, and we can all have it, as it were, as Rawls says in the theory of justice. Hume says, yes, we all think this makes sense, and it will ruin society. The best to have it as the best to have society as it is now, and he has a look at how it's utility that causes the difference between right and wrong, and how all these things, we lose sight of this very often, but ideas of beauty relate to utility, ideas of virtue relate to utility, and so on. And he advocates this at length. But what he says is a problem solver is private property. Private property does solve the problems of morals. It decides what we do. So it is as a hymn to private property that I think the Second Inquiry is a notable book. And I would, Marx was very fond of Hume. He read all of Hume, and he quotes him extensively, and he never, oddly enough, if you go through Marx, the one author who he doesn't, or at least I can't recall a single attack by Marx on Hume, yet I can't recall another writer who quotes who he doesn't attack. So I think Marx was impressed by Hume. However, I wonder what, I suppose he just, because Marx had this Aristotelian idea that, you don't write recipes for the cookshops of the future. But certainly I would say that whilst it doesn't have actually the economic calculation argument in, it does have a strong argument against communism. And it has a strong argument against abstract ideas. It's the sort of thing that most certainly did influence Edmund Burke and his reflections on the French Revolution. Burke reiterates a lot of the criticisms in Hume against the French revolutionaries, but of course they were made by Hume against people who he hadn't witnessed at all. They had been born, they had fought the Civil War in the 1640s, and he was born in 1711. But he's basically frightened of these fanatics. He's frightened of these. Communism sounds good, but in actual fact, when it comes down to it, it is very harsh to human beings. And when I found that Winstanley advocated death penalty, I was a bit shocked, just like I was shocked with Frank Harris advocating killing people because of mere beliefs. But I don't think Hume was so shocked. I think he expected that sort of thing from those sorts of ideals. And this is what he, what looks good at first glance isn't always all that good when you come to think about it in depth. And communism seems friendly, but in actual fact it's not very friendly at all. It leads to people treating each other rather savagely. Now, I actually think that I do still think that Marx has got nothing to do with the Russian Revolution, notwithstanding the attacks by Kolakowski in the main currents of Marxism that says he must have. He's been through Kolakowski says in that book, he says, I've been through the arguments, and but he says there must be something. Oddly enough, I think there's a nearer link to Engels than to Marx, because Engels does talk about imperialism after Marx's death. And Lenin, of course, talked about imperialism, which, as far as I'm concerned, replaces the Marxist analysis. But still, I don't think. I don't think Marx can be blamed for the Russian Revolution. But I think it's probably true what Hume says, that these ideas might lead to that far more than what you think at first glance. I mean, if you're going to be really strict, a strict pacifist shouldn't well, Peace Pledge Union, for example, was a pacifist organisation. They wouldn't even defend themselves in a fight if they got in a pub in a fight. And I remember way back in 1971, where I had this friend of mine, in fact, he might even be watching this if he ever gets onto YouTube, called David Hume, who actually did almost get into a fight. And I mean, my last fight was when I was 13, but I was dead sure for about 15 minutes or so that I was going to have another one at the age of 22. But I didn't. I mean, as soon as because these fellows were attracted by Shannon because he was saying, I won't fight. Of course, that attracts anyone because it means they can be hit for nothing. But as soon as some of his friends, and I was one of them, said, well, we will defend him, they're no longer a free lunch, as it were. So they backed up. But so really, extreme communism or pacifist shouldn't really lead to violence and shouldn't advocate killing people for mere ideas or executing people for just owning property or anything like that. However, Winstanley did have these neat ideas, and he did say that. And Lenin certainly was, I think, no better than Hitler myself. And always I've thought that just one speaks Russian, the other speaks German. I think that's about the difference between them. But so I think he's just a rogue anyway. I don't think there's anything nice about him, Lenin. But Marx, I think he's different. Not so bad. He's bad-tempered, but not violent as far as I could see. But nevertheless, there is the association between nice ideas and nasty policies. And Hume tends to think in his principles of morals that that's what we can expect from nice ideas. We can expect nasty solutions. But he reckons that private property and ordinary common sense and ordinary custom is that the problem is better than the solutions that young men come up with. And with that, I'll throw it up for discussion.
Thank you.
Very good. Are there any questions or criticisms?
Well, yes, could you say a bit more about how he defends private property? He doesn't just say, hurrah, I'm sure this will be better in practice than all of these theoretical...
Oh, no, he thinks that we've got private property now,
yes.
So he thinks it needs no defence. But he does say that if you think about it, the best hypothesis that can explain why we've got it is that it is for the greater utility of society. And he makes a difference between selfishness. Another plank. There's one private property, one sentiments as the basis of morals, but another plank is to correct Hobbes on selfishness. That's another where he brings in the lessons he's learned from Joseph Butler. So he makes a difference between selfishness or self-love and benevolence, which is more of a social thing. And he says he said that these very often are in conjunction with each other. There's no clash between the individual and society very often, but sometimes there is, and certainly with criminal activity there certainly is. Although he points out that even with criminals, there is honour among thieves, i.e. they respect each other's private property rights, and they return to normal society among themselves, even though they've ironically, for their own selfish gain, broken society and burgled or stolen or mistreated other people to get money on criminal activity. Nevertheless, among themselves, they maintain the ordinary laws of society, the ordinary morals. And he thinks the best thing to explain all this is the hypothesis he put forward that the utility explains it. So he isn't advocating something new. He's really a conservative who's defending what's there, although he's not really defending it, he's saying it is there, and I'm explaining it. Marx once said, philosophers have tried to interpret the world, the point is to change it. Well, Hume was the opposite of that. The point of philosophy is to explain the world. There's no need to change it.
The thing about private property, doesn't it hint about when Wittgenstein would claim something like disagreement only makes sense with the background of agreement, You're talking about the honour of criminals. So you can work at the margins, but you don't want total chaos.
I think it is true that
We've got something to work with, but if you abandon the system, we're going back to the Stone Age.
Well, I think it is true that we do all agree with each other most of the time. And again, the reason why we do all disagree with each other most of the time, because we live in the same world. It's exactly the same world.
That's
so